Hi everyone, Scott Lewis here for Wirefly. Today I'm here to bring you a cell phone schmackdown between the very popular Samsung Galaxy S3 and the Google Nexus 4. Now both of these phones are for T-Mobile. Now they both have international versions that are available that might have some slight spec differences and software differences, but these are the T-Mobile editions for the Galaxy S3 and the Nexus 4, so let's go ahead and dig into our schmackdown today with round 1, the design round. As we go through the design round, you'll notice that there's not a huge difference between the two phones, and some things are actually going to come down to personal preference. So let's go ahead and start off with the displays. The Galaxy S3 has a 4.8-inch diagonal LCD display, where the Nexus 4 has a 4.7-inch LCD display. Screen resolution on the S3 is 720 by 1280, which gives it 306 pixels per inch for pixel density, while the Nexus 4 has 769 by 1280 screen resolution, which gives it a pixel density of 318 pixels per inch. The display stats are very similar, and to me, I really can't tell a difference between the Galaxy S3 and the Nexus 4 displays. I think they're both very crisp and very clear, and are very good high-quality displays. Now the S3 has a removable 2100 mAh battery, so you can peel off the back cover here. And this is the removable battery for the Galaxy S3. Like I said, 2100 mAh. Now, that is good for 15 hours of talk time and 8.3 days of standby time. While the Nexus 4 has an integrated battery, so you can't pull off the back cover, which is actually a piece of glass on the Nexus 4. It is also a 2100 mAh battery, and it's good for 12 hours of talk time and 10.4 days of standby time. Now, the integrated battery design doesn't mean the battery can never be replaced, but it's not something the average consumer can do on their own. It would be something that you would need to take your phone in and have it professionally serviced. So even though they're the same milliamp hours, the S3 would have a slight advantage because you can actually remove the battery and replace it on your own. So looking at all the design aspects of the phones, I'm going to go ahead and award the S3 the winner for round 1. I like the replaceable battery, the slightly larger display, it has a really nice feel in your hand, and not having to worry about glass in the front and the back breaking like I would on the Nexus 4 gives the S3 a slight advantage and a win for round 1. So let's go ahead and move on to round 2 now. Round 2 is going to be about specs and benchmarks between the two phones. I did some benchmark testing before we did the video here, and I was a little surprised at the results, so let's see if we get the same results from the benchmark tests that we do here on the video. Before we get into the benchmarks, let's go ahead and cover the specs so you know what we're going to be comparing. The Galaxy S3 has a dual-core 1.5 GHz processor. It has 2 GB of RAM, and it comes as an option for onboard storage of 16 or 32 GB. While the Nexus 4 has a quad-core 1.5 GHz processor, 2 GB of processor RAM, but only comes in one option of 16 GB of onboard storage. Something else to note about the Nexus 4 is the fact that it doesn't have a spot for a micro SD card, while the Galaxy S3, in addition to coming in a 16 or 32 GB of onboard storage option, has the ability underneath that back battery cover to expand memory by up to 64 GB. So while the Nexus 4 has the advantage with the quad-core processor, they both have the 2 GB of processor RAM, the onboard storage definitely goes to the Galaxy S3. So now that we've covered the specs, let's go ahead and run a couple benchmark tests. We're going to do 2 benchmarks today. We're going to do the quadrant standard benchmark, and we'll do that first. And we'll do an Antutu benchmark here in a second. Something to keep in mind about the Antutu benchmark and the quadrant standard benchmark is that they test 4 things in a phone. They test the processor, the memory in the phone, the read-write speed to the storage of the phone, as well as the graphics processor in the phone. So our connection to Wi-Fi or to T-Mobile's network has no bearing on either one of these benchmark tests. So I'm going to turn the camera off for a second, and I'll pick it up at the end of the quadrant standard benchmark. So both the Galaxy S3 and the Nexus 4 have finished off the quadrant standard benchmark. Let's go ahead and take a look at the scores. The Galaxy S3 has a score of 6,133, while the Nexus 4 and its quad-core processor versus a dual-core processor has an overall score of 4,934. And I said earlier I was a little surprised by some of the test results that I did earlier, and this is the one I'm surprised with. Normally when you see a dual-core versus a quad-core phone, the quad-core processor has an advantage and almost always has a higher quadrant standard benchmark. So that's our quadrant standard benchmark score. Let's go ahead and take a look at our Antutu benchmark score, or let's go ahead and run the Antutu benchmark and give you a score. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off, and I'll pick it up at the end of the Antutu benchmark. So the S3 and the Nexus 4 have finished up the Antutu benchmark. Let's go ahead and take a look at our scores. We have the Galaxy S3 with a 10,679 score, and the score for the Nexus 4 is 16,184. So with a split decision in the benchmarks, I'm going to have to default to the fact that the Galaxy S3 has the option to expand memory with microSD, as well as coming in a 16 or 32 GB option, where the only option for the Nexus 4 is a 16 GB option. So our winner for round 2 is the Galaxy S3. So let's go ahead and take a look at the last round, the camera round. I was very impressed with both of these cameras. I'm going to show you some sample photos real quick, but let's cover the specs real quick. Both phones have front-facing cameras, and the Galaxy S3 has a 1.9 megapixel front-facing camera, where the Nexus 4 has a 1.3 megapixel front-facing camera. Now the rear-facing cameras on both of the phones, they're 8 megapixel cameras, as well as having LED flashes, so they both have very similar setups, and you would expect both phones to act pretty similar, and they do. They both take great photos, and I was very impressed with the navigation through all the camera settings, and all the different options that they had on the display while you were trying to take a photo. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the sample photos that I took with the Galaxy S3 and the Nexus 4. Our first example is a picture right outside the Wirefly building here. I thought it was a nice contrast between the red and the silver in the fire hydrant, and the browns and the greens in the grass. Now as you can see, both pictures came out really well. Both are HDR photos, so they're the high definition resolution photos that the cameras have the option to take. One thing that I noticed while taking HDR photos with both of the phones is that the Nexus 4 will only take an HDR photo and store one photo in your gallery, while the Galaxy S3 actually takes two photos. It takes the HDR as well as a standard definition. Now that could be a good thing or bad thing. You are taking up a lot of storage space with two photos, but it does give you the option to choose which one you like better. Now our next example is a picture that I took right outside, still the Wirefly building here, and there's a little pond with a fountain in it. There were some geese flying around there. I thought it took a really nice picture, nice bright blue sky. I will say that the Nexus 4 is slightly darker than the Galaxy S3 in the sky color. While I like the darker, richer blue that's in the Nexus 4's picture, the Galaxy S3's lighter, whiter blue is more accurate to what the sky actually was. The next photo example that I'm going to show you is a photosphere picture that I took with the Nexus 4. A photosphere picture is like a 360 panoramic picture that wraps all the way around and captures everything. So you can actually scroll up and down on a photosphere picture, and you'll see down by your feet and up over your head, up into the sky. So you can capture the whole environment, so you can share everything that's going on around you. Now right now the S3 does not have this option, but from what I've heard, Android 4.2 will have the photosphere option. So when the Galaxy S3 does get that software update, the photosphere option should be on there. Now, I was really impressed with the photosphere. It actually is a very unique way to take a picture. I do have to say, everyone that I showed this photo to was very impressed with how it came out. Now, some of them weren't quite sure how they would use it every day, but I don't know if it's something that you would use every day. I think it would be something that you could use on a special occasion. Maybe you're at a sporting event or a concert or a family gathering and you wanted to capture everything that was going on at one time. I think this would be a really neat way to show everyone what's going on around you in one photo. So those were the photo samples I wanted to share with you in round 3. Let's go ahead and recap round 3 real quick. With the specs being so similar between the two phones, and the fact that they both took great quality photos, I'm going to have to give the slight advantage for round 3 to the Nexus 4. I thought the photosphere option on the Nexus 4 was great, and gives it a slight advantage over the S3 right now, even though I understand that the S3 should get that same option with the next Android update that it gets. Even though round 3 went to the Nexus 4, our overall win for today goes to the Galaxy S3 for winning the design round and the spec round. Now, if you're looking for a great deal on the S3 or the Nexus 4, make sure to check out Wirefly.com. We have some of the best prices on the internet. So that wraps up our Schmackdown for today. My name's Scott Lewis for Wirefly. Thanks for watching.